Katchen and Garielle Lutz. In addition to their accomplishments in the arts and education, Michael and Garielle are both members of the class of 1973. Hello. Hey, come here often? Michael, Garielle, Greg Jansak, Jerome Kukan, and I were all in Mr. Gitch's 10th grade homeroom. When Greg, Jerome, Garielle, and I formed the band Juke, Michael sat in occasionally on keyboards. The Katchen House was a social center for many of us. In fact, in Garielle's book, Backwardness, includes 2 excerpts from letters that dealt with the social scene at Mike's. Sadly, Mike passed away on February 12, 2023, after a 10-year battle with Parkinson's disease and ALS. This evening, the award for Michael Katchen will be accepted by Mike's wife, Susan Barney. Mike graduated from the Philadelphia College of Art with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree and earned a Master of Fine Arts from Hunter College. While at Hunter, he interned at the Franklin Furnace, an arts organization which, at the time, was located in Manhattan, which presented and archived artist books and later performance art. He was hired by Franklin Furnace as Registrar and Director of Collections. While in this capacity, he managed the digitization of the former Franklin Furnace collection of 13,500 artist books, which had been transferred to the Museum of Modern Art. Mike was also responsible for digitizing and archiving 45 years of performances which had occurred at the Franklin Furnace. These are now available for public viewing. I volunteer as an archivist at the Delaware County Institute of Science, and I can vouch that in the museum sector, archiving is both tedious and thankless. So what Michael did was nothing short of Herculean. As a senior archivist, he was a frequent speaker, panelist, and presenter at conferences sponsored by the Society of American Archivists, American Institute for Conservation of Historic and Artistic Works, Electronic Media Group, and the Association of Moving Image Archivists, among others. In 2022, the board of Franklin Furnace honored Michael's long and dedicated service by naming the historical database he created the Michael D. Katchen Relational Database. A year after his passing, and coinciding with the Pratt Institute's The Ballad of Reversals, Ephemeral Images of Ephemeral Art, a panel consisting of Michael's Franklin Furnace colleagues discussed his career and legacy. Earlier this year, an exhibit entitled Hidden in Stacks, Digitizing the Franklin Furnace Archived Artist Books, Vertical Files, was dedicated to the memory of Michael. In addition to his career as an archivist, Michael was an artist. His works had been presented in one-person exhibition at the Stanford Museum and were in group exhibitions at Henry Street Settlement, Rhode Island School of Design, Housatonic Museum of Art, Connecticut College, and the New York Public Library. Additionally, he was an adjunct faculty member at the New York School of Visual Art, where he mentored both domestic and international undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral students. Michael was an avid swimmer, photographer, and handyman. In 2001, he married the artist Suzanne Varney. They have 2 daughters, Lucina and Marissa, who are fortunate to have inherited their parents' creative talents. On a personal note, some of my fondest memories of high school are the friends I made and time spent in the basement of the Katchen house. And as a volunteer archivist, I often find myself asking, how would Mike do this? I'll conclude with a quote from Harley Spiller, executive director of the Franklin Furnace. And while this refers to Mike's tenure at the Franklin Furnace, I think it also serves as a testimony to Michael Katchen as an artist, husband, father, and friend. I quote, Mike's name is dropped at least daily around these parts. Everything we touch seems guided by his precedents. So I'd like to introduce Suzanne Varney.
Hello. So, I just have to say that Michael had a great time in high school, and he shared many happy memories with us. His stories made it clear that his time at Dieruff shaped his lifelong interests and passions. The educators here supported and encouraged him in countless ways. He spent so many hours in the Audiovisual Club led by Mr. Ted Fee, where he created and produced and starred in his own talk show called The World of Bees, and his nickname was Bees. His art teacher, Mr. Jack Eagle, encouraged him to choreograph a performance art piece and present it at the talent show, a story he loved to recall. In his free time, Michael created journals, photo albums and just to record his high school adventures. And in one album, he documented his tight-knit group of friends and titled the group portrait, The Crazy Gang. These friends are now musicians and poets and scientists and writers. Garielle Lutz is here tonight to recognize for her writing, and Keith Jones has led a distinguished career in science. And as you know, he nominated Michael for the Wall of Distinction and has been a blessing to my daughters and me over the past few years. In art college, Michael began using many of his high school interests to inform his art. His journaling and photo albums transformed into detailed, large-scale, multimedia collages. And while searching for a college internship, he discovered a non-for-profit artist space called the Franklin. The space reflected his interest in photography, collage, artist books, and performance art, and was famous for attracting an eclectic group of people, so he stayed for 43 years. I know that Michael would be extremely grateful. He came to all the reunions, Dieruff reunions. He really liked coming back and seeing people. So he would be extremely grateful, appreciative of this recognition and plaque. And I'm sure he'd hope that the newest Dieruff Crazy Gang might take notice and be inspired to pursue their passions and create meaningful art of their own. Additionally, I find the Wall of Distinction itself to be a really impressive project. And I just want to thank Principal Schmidt, the Alumni Association, and Joanne for executing this really fantastic event. Thank you.
And now to introduce the next inductee is and that's classmate Keith Jones. Again, you're here for an encore.
But I'm glad I'm the opening act. For tonight's event, it was requested we keep our remarks less than 5 minutes. For Garielle, this will be a challenge, but I'll try and keep it under 5. If you Google Garielle Lutz, you'll find writer. You'll receive 18 pages of results on Google. In 2022, Literary Hub floated her name as a dark horse candidate for the Nobel Prize in Literature. And in 2025, there was still one online betting site for those who want to wager that Garielle would win this year. Maybe next year. The periodicals which have reviewed her writings include the Chicago Review, The Nation, the Southwest Review, the Paris Review, the Los Angeles Review of Books, the New York Review of Books, Art Forum, the London Review of Books, and dozens of online sites. Works have been described as untranslatable, but at least until this year, when several books were translated into German and were met with glowing reviews. I'm a bit prejudiced about Garielle's success as a writer. I've been fortunate to be friends with Garielle since we met at Ritter Elementary in 1966. I can't tell you what I had for supper last week, but I can still rattle off Lutz's phone number from the 60s. Even though we had fallen out of contact for some time, thanks to the internet, I followed her writing career. It's an understatement to say that I'm glad to see a close friend garner so many accolades. Garielle received a BA from Kutztown State College in 1977 and an MA from Ohio University in 1979. She was a professor of English at the Greensburg campus of the University of Pittsburgh until her retirement in 2020. During her tenure as a teacher, Garielle was also a writer in residence at the Vermont Studio Center. Additionally, she had been a visiting writer at Syracuse University and the University of Kansas. In 1996, Garielle was a recipient of the National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. In 1999, she received a Grant to Artists Award from New York's Foundation for Contemporary Arts. Among the literary magazines and journals in which her work appeared are Conjunctions, Noon, McSweeney's, The Believer, Chicago Review, Columbia Review of Literature and Art, New York Tyrant, Mid-American Review, Slate.com, and the Cimarron Review. Lutz's work has been included in the anthologies and Anchor Book of New American Short Stories, Prose Poetry, Flash Fiction, and Mythology, The Apocalypse Reader, and a Best of Fence, The First 9 Years. From 1997 to 2000, she edited fiction for Five Trope, an online journal of experimental poetry and prose. Garielle's first book, entitled Stories in the Worst Way, was published by Knopf in 1996. Since then, she has had 6 additional books of short stories published. In addition, in 2015, she published a reference book on grammar, The Gotham Grammarian. The complete Gary Lutz, an anthology of her writings, was published in 2017. Backwardness, a collection of 50-plus years of journals, letters, essays, emails, etc., was published in 2024 and is now in its second printing. The author Sam Lipsyte summed up Garielle's work much better than I ever could, and I quote, "I've been reading her work for 3 decades and watched her become one of the most admired writers of literary fiction in the country and abroad. Lutz does not receive the same kind of mainstream coverage as the best-selling authors, but her work has been a touchstone for many of our best contemporary writers. Challenging, funny, experimental, concerned with the collisions of language and feeling, but also very much rooted in her everyday experiences and the towns and cities she's known. Lutz's work has reached the pinnacle of prominence in many circles. It is both published and discussed in the leading magazines and journals. Entire conferences have been devoted to it here and internationally. It is now my pleasure and privilege to introduce you to Garielle Lutz.
Thank you so much, Keith. As a student at Dieruff in the early 1970s, I was a nervous, bewildered kid. Alienated, ungainly, oblivious, backward, indrawn, inept, self-sabotaging, practically mute. And although those adjectives most likely still apply to me at age 69, I did enjoy at least 3 significant and formative experiences during my high school years. One of them was finding myself in an English class taught by Helen Rivera. Even though I cannot remember ever once letting out even as much as a peep in her class, nevertheless, sitting in her classroom was my first real-life encounter with a representative of a world of high standards and high culture, and I fell under her spell. She was a woman of sly wit and molten intelligence and intellectual grace, and her devotion to the written word was a life changer for me as an inarticulate Pennsylvania Dutch kid without much exposure to the arts growing up. I wanted to try to impress her with my clumsy skirmishes with the English language, but I doubt I ever succeeded. Mrs. Rivera was the most self-possessed person I had ever met up to that point in my life. Nothing seemed to rattle her. Next to the doorway to her classroom, she had posted a name card with Helen Rivera spelled out in elegant lowercase letters. And when some wiseacre boy, roaming the halls one day, took out a magic marker and crossed out her last name and wrote commode in big, thuggish block letters above it, she was utterly unfazed. She never even took the name card down. I remember once walking past the little closet in her classroom and noticing that the coat she had hung up in there had a Saks Fifth Avenue label. Up to that point, I must have assumed that everybody in Allentown bought their clothes at Laneco department stores or off the ready-to-wear racks at Fox Food Basket. Or maybe at Hess Brothers during the monthly Monday morning cleanup clearance pandemoniums, where you could sometimes snag a halfway presentable blouse for as little as 50 cents. Mrs. Rivera brought a radiant Manhattan-esque glamour, all her own, to the working class east side of Allentown, with its Fosnocks and ring bologna, 8th Street root beer, Buddy's beef burgers. Back then, I stupidly never wondered about where Mrs. Rivera came from, or what her private life might be like. I, of course, had no idea of how old she might have been. As a teenager, I thought any adult was just a few years away from being carried off in a bathrobe to the Phoebe home. 2 decades later, one of the first things I did when I finally and belatedly signed up for internet connectivity with AOL was to search for her. I found nothing on Google or Ask Jeeves or anywhere else. A couple of decades after that, just recently, I resorted to artificial intelligence to seek her out. Again, nothing came up. She seems to have disappeared completely, but not from my memory, where she lives in vivid, indelible brilliance. Another formative influence on me was a home economics class I took during the spring of my final year. It was an elective, and every day I elected to sit at a long table with a bunch of other disaffected and ambitiously revolutionary college-bound seniors, and we ignored the teacher completely. We spent every class period unconcealedly scribbling song lyrics and poems, or drawing pictures and caricatures, or fashioning origami grotesqueries out of tablet paper, or just pushing gleefully cynical notes toward each other. We were just months and then weeks and then just days away from a future far beyond hallway locker combinations and the morning's basketful of business club soft pretzels, and the unaccountably weird requirement that boys had to take swimming class in the nude. A requirement that was finally abolished a few years after we graduated, and we went on to drier and fully attired lives. One of the regulars at that home economics table was none other than Michael Katchen, who is being honored posthumously this evening. In his reading matter one day, Michael happened upon the adjective awry and decided that both the pronunciation and the meaning of that word were appallingly inadequate. So he transformed those two misbegotten syllables into a noun pronounced as the sort of beagle-eye outcry of arure, and saturated it with an entirely new meaning. The word now meant a reprimand or a tongue lashing, as in, I keep getting arures from my homeroom teacher. Every day in home economics class was a fresh burst of joyfully offbeat creativity. A third and final transformative experience I'm grateful for having enjoyed as a Dieruff student was playing drums in a garage band with 3 other Dieruff kids, all of us in the same year at school. Keith Jones, who has been my dear friend since 6th grade, and who, with his limitless curiosity and irrepressible good cheer, went on to a noteworthy career in science and psychopharmacology, and who graciously nominated me for the Wall of Distinction. Keith played robust, lyrical, steady-handed bass guitar. Jerome Cocan, the lead guitarist, wrote songs and sang them and played them with the soul and authority of a visionary poet. Greg Jansak, the rhythm guitarist, was the most practical-minded and steadfast of us. Played with a ringing, declarative, head-clearing clarity. We called our band Juke, as Keith mentioned earlier, and the noise we made, mostly on Saturday afternoons in my parents' garage, was the noise of youth and confusion and blue-collar ambivalence and objection. Our music was a heady and improvisational mix of 1960s celebratory utopian hopefulness and the darkening proto-punkiness of the early 1970s. We weren't imitating anybody. We didn't even try to imitate anybody else. And playing our music together functioned as a much-needed safety valve through which we tried to get the messy emotional tumultuations of late adolescence out of our frazzled nervous systems. For me, our rehearsals were always the highlight of my week, and they were therapeutically crucial after the despairs and humiliations of long, wearying days in corridors and classrooms. I never once expected that any trace of me would survive at Dieruff Senior High, so I am deeply grateful to be included on the Wall of Distinction. Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Joanne, and the entire Alumni Association. Many thanks.
I would love to have a copy of this for our records. Okay.
Dr. Beverly E. Mackus Stevens, PhD,